When a new pope takes office, he must forget his name and forget about resting again, at least during the first few months, where the secrets that the Vatican hides are revealed to him, and only he can know them. Pay attention! Pope León had been in office for 4 days, and of course, sleeping had been impossible. And even less that night, because he knew very well that at exactly 5:55, whether he wanted to or not, he had to descend into the catacombs of the Vatican to meet with the Immortal One. With the hunter who has captured for the church the creatures that are locked up in the prison on the 3rd basement level. León was really upset because just hours ago he was told that every new pope is required to meet Judas Iscariote, the protector and monster hunter of the Vatican. And that's not all. No, because it's not just a simple meeting, a handshake, and that's it. Nothing like that. Father Rukaku, the chief jailer of the Vatican, had made it clear to him when he said, "I'll come for you at 5:55. Not a minute before, not a minute after. Because, without exception, every new pope is required to perform the holy Prima Cachia, the first hunt of the papacy, together with Judas. In fact, every so often León would get out of bed, look at himself in the mirror and say, "This is all nonsense, a joke. How is Judas the traitor still alive?" You have to understand that León was on the verge of collapse. As a cardinal, things were simpler. If the Bible says Judas hanged himself, he hanged himself, period. But now he had been informed that not only did Iscariot never betray Jesus, but the Messiah forbade him to die so that he would always help and protect the church. That the Vatican had the complete Gospels, and that they knew for certain that Judas was Jesus' best friend, and that he is the only one who sacrificed himself completely for him. So whether I wanted to or not, I had to meet him, just like every new pope has done. But León hoped that this nonsense was some kind of joke. Even more so when Rukaku, before saying goodbye the night before, had told him, "Let's just pray that Judas has come back." It was a mission to recapture those 2 Nahuales who escaped from our prison. Our beloved Judas Iscariot, the Vatican's monster hunter. What would we do without him? 5:55. They knock on the door and Rukaku enters. He looks at him with a worried face and says, "Terrible news, Your Holiness. Our hero Judas hasn't returned yet. The Nahuales sailed for Mexico. They are being chased." León laughed and replied, "Perfect. If we forget about this nonsense with Cousin Cachia, I don't know how much, and I can focus on what I have to do." But Rukaku interrupted, clarifying, "No, Your Holiness, this is terrible news, because you will have to do your holy cousin Cachia with the assistant, and I'm sorry to tell you it's not the same. At least it wasn't for some poor predecessors of yours who had the bad luck of going hunting with him. Get ready, because we're going to go down so you can meet the other immortal, Your Holiness, the assistant, the Plan B. Whether you want to or not, we must go right now to the catacombs to visit Lazarus, the one resurrected by Jesus." Pope León was left with his jaw dropped and asked him, "What are you talking about?" "Hey, I don't understand a thing. Speak clearly. Don't mess around." Rukaku, with a serious face, replied, "If Your Holiness uses that Peruvian dialect, I'm the one who doesn't understand. I apologize and I'll explain it better. Every new pope, without exception, must go out hunting. With Judas, it's always been like that, and it's magnificent because He always does the work, Your Holiness. But if the Iscariot isn't there, the sacred first hunt must still take place. That's how it's written. It's the way a pope understands that being the spiritual leader of 1,300,000,000 people is not his only task. It's our responsibility to protect the world from all those infernal creatures that are still on the loose. That's why he must go with Lazarus right now. And well, you'll see. Terrible news. I hope the creature you're chasing today is one of the easy ones. You know, one of those annoying tooth fairies or some mummy that can barely move properly. This way, Your Holiness. We have to go down 66 steps and 6 landings, and we'll reach the Catacombs. You want to know it all, right? Do you want to learn the harsh reality of the Vatican in detail? Of course you're willing. And you know well that I won't disappoint you because I am El Documentalista. And this is the secret catacombs of the Vatican Pope León. Visits Lazarus. As you already know, my informant on Vatican matters is Father Ingaro, a priest who is currently on good terms with the Catholic Church, but who, in his youth, was the personal assistant to Pope John Paul II. So he knows every corner and every important person there. Pay attention, because according to his contacts, that's how the events happened. Rukaku went straight to the big wardrobe where the Pope keeps his clothes. That one is basically a master key that lets you control the secret passages. He opened the second drawer, then the fifth, and then the third. Finally, he placed his hand on the fifth drawer again and slammed it shut. And that's when they heard him. The sound of gears and locks moving at the foot of the bed. The floor opened up and a hidden staircase appeared. The priest lit an old lantern and said, "Holy Father, it's time." And together they began to descend. At the end of the stairs, there was a tiny iron door that they passed through while crouching, and they found a large hallway that lit up halfway, revealing 2 large armchairs and an extraordinary oak cabinet with more than 80 weapons from different eras and regions. Father Rukaku opened it and, looking at the Pope with a solemn air, said, "You must choose one, Your Holiness, as it is written." León laughed heartily, shook his head from side to side, and asked ironically, "Let me know if you find any way for this to get any weirder." But he told him the truth. If that thing about Lazarus is true, well, at least I'm going to meet someone who really was a friend of Jesus. And saying this, he took from among all the magnificent weapons a simple and old shepherd's sling, made of leather and braided plant fibers. Rukaku said to him, "Excellent choice, Your Holiness. With that sling, David defeated the Nephilim. Goliath has the strange power of never missing. It's a big advantage in the secret books, where we have to write down what happens. In the Holy Prima Cachias, it is recorded that only Pope Pius, the third of the year 1503, used it. What a coincidence. He also had to go hunting with Lazaro Pobre. They faced an ancient vampire. Pius had good aim, and the Nosferatu took a terrible blow to the head with a stone. And nothing, of course. The vampire didn't even flinch and just laughed in his face. Lazarus arrived and defeated him, but it was too late. The Ancient One had already bitten the Pope's leg, and you know, a few months later, Pius XIII died. No, not entirely. We still have him in the cell. 200. One bloodthirsty. León realized he was serious and put down David's sling. He took a short sword with the Hebrew inscription Shimon Kepha. The priest looked pleased and said to him, "The sword of Simon Peter, our first pope of the church." With that same sword, he cut off the ear of the high priest's servant when they arrested Jesus, and he also used it to pierce the heart of the tiger of Sinai, a monstrous animal they used to hunt down the first Christians. The blade of the sword glows red hot when evil is near. But His Holiness? That would be a good choice if you were going hunting with Judas. But since you have to go with Lazarus, I would recommend a machine gun, or the little cannon down there. It belonged to the ship of the corsair Jean Lafitte and was blessed by. But Pope Leo gave him a sign for silence, kissed St. Peter's sword, and tied it to his waist, saying, "Look, Rukaku, I have a busy schedule. In case you didn't know, so call Lazarus. And let's put an end to this nonsense of protocols, hunts, and weird rituals once and for all." But the priest, looking offended, said to him, "That's how it is written, Your Holiness. And I'm sorry to inform you that Lazaro is not coming up here. We have to use the old elevator and, well, as I told you, terrible news, because we'll have to go through the other catacombs. You know, the secret ones. And come on, you'd better see it for yourself." Rukaku turned a crucifix to the left and a door opened. Behind it was an old elevator with counterweights, made entirely of cast iron with fine ornaments. The priest invited the Pope to get in, saying, "After you, Your Holiness." The Freemasons who built this were the worst. They used those greedy dwarves from the mines, bringing them to dig deep tunnels. They promised gold, but the Freemasons broke their word. So hold on tight, because, well, when they left, they were angry and left some traps, and... All right, they were inside. The priest pulled the lever, and they started to descend. On the first level of catacombs, they saw fine coffins of kings and Catholic saints. On the second, third, and fourth, thousands of armored skeletons had arrows lodged in them. Rukaku told him the battle of the catacombs. You know, someone read the guide to Tulekimi, the Picatrix, by accident and woke up the dead? We still don't know who was such an idiot. And finally, they reached the fifth level of the catacombs, where the elevator stopped. A huge hallway that seemed deserted. The priest signaled the Pope to stay silent by putting a finger to his mouth, then lit up the walls with the lantern. León trembled when he saw that there were horrifying creatures clinging to the walls. Rukaku whispered to him, "Shh, Your Holiness, porcos." The dwarves left them there to deter anyone from passing. Damn greedy miners. They brought these enchanted creatures from deep inside the mountains so they would awaken and devour anyone who makes noise while passing by, but they don't wake up right away. Nothing like that. Imagine, the dwarves needed time to escape when they set this deadly trap. So they conjured them to come back to life with a bit of a delay. But to this day, we don't know how much time we have to escape. So no one was ever foolish enough to disturb their eternal sleep. And bringing the lantern to his face, Rukaku pleaded for the love of Christ. Don't even think about making the slightest noise and walk in the middle. Because like all orcs, well, you know, they love priest meat, Your Holiness. León and Rukaku walked slowly and stealthily, one foot in front of the other, and as far away from the walls as possible. But halfway there, the Pope felt a terrible urge to sneeze, and no matter how much he tried to cover his nose, he couldn't help it. Rukaku's lantern lit up the orc that was closest. Nothing was moving, except for them, who were trembling like chihuahuas, nervous. The Pope, noticing that the priest was glancing at him out of the corner of his eye, said, "Doesn't a person have the right to catch a cold?" "Don't worry, Rukaku, it's just as you said. They don't wake up right away, and when someone sneezes, be polite and say, 'Bless you.'" Finally, they went through a wooden door and opened another one made of copper. and there in that big hole they found Lazarus asleep. León looked him over. He was sitting in a fine fabric armchair. He was a man covered in old scars, looked about 40 years old, but was very muscular and had a long beard. Rukaku explained. When Jesus resurrected him, he had been dead for 4 days, and as the Bible says in Hebrews 9:27, "And just as it is appointed for men to die once, and after this, the judgment." Well, your holiness, he died once and he can't die again. So here it is. Leo didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but raising a hand toward the Immortal, he looked at Rukaku and said with a mischievous tone, "I've always wanted to say this." And with a thunderous voice he shouted, "Lazarus, come forth and come outside." The sleeper jumped up, taking only a moment to realize where he was, and burst out laughing. He approached the Pope, shook his hand, and said in perfect Spanish, "This is the 3rd time they've played the same joke on me. Hope you outlive the previous ones. Why do popes mention Lazarus and come out? That's how everyone wakes me up." "Pleasure to meet you. Your Holiness, as you may know, the main monster hunter is on a mission. We must do it before your holy cousin catches us. Now, listen, there are 3 rules, and you must follow them to the letter. Number 1 only. I am immortal, so let me go ahead. I don't want to fail again. 2, if I say run, you run as fast as you can. 3, the creature we have to face is number 1 in Judas's notebook for this region. No exceptions. And let me see, here it is. And when he opened the book, the color drained from his face. He looked at León, he looked at Rukaku, he looked back at the pages, and with a sad expression, he said, "My God, my Jesus, it looks like we have a Leviathan. At least it says here that it's still a pup. It's being raised by a coven of witches on the shores of Lake Alvano. It says it's already out of sacred food. We don't have time to waste. We'll go through the south tunnel." León interrupted and said, "It's a joke, right? He's referring to Leviathan, the one from the Old Testament, the gigantic, fearsome, and untamable sea monster, symbol of primordial chaos with whom God played." Lazarus opened a cabinet, took out a bow and an arrow, and replied, "To him. Except this one is a hatchling here. It says they've been feeding it for 150 years. Don't worry, they don't grow that much in such a short time. Judas also wrote something I don't understand, something about not reading. I don't know what. Well, don't worry, I'm bringing my bow. And the tips of these arrows were made by Ulysses in Ithaca, a great ancient sage, although he believed in Poseidon, Zeus, and all that group of lesser gods. The tips of these arrows are capable of piercing anything. This way, to the south tunnel." Lazarus chose one of the 4 doors, and in front of them was a small mining cart on rails forged from the same iron as the elevator. The dwarves had dug tunnels stretching for kilometers beneath all of Italy to extract the gold they were never given. The 3 of them got in, and Rukaku was in charge of pulling the lever so the cart would start moving at high speed through that dark and narrow tunnel. On the way, León took the opportunity to ask Lazarus what Jesus was like, how they had become friends. And of course, what was it like to be dead? Lazarus answered, looking worried. "It's been centuries since I had a cousin. Damn. I'm nervous. Just letting you know I'm not the best at this. I remember poor Pope Urbano VII. It was simple. Judas wasn't there, and we went together to drive out a plague of locusts and demon-possessed mosquitoes. The only thing he had to do was avoid getting bitten. Poor Urbano died of malaria a week later. But talking a little distracts me. You curious priests always ask me the same questions. All right, listen. Jesus was tall and strong. His work as a carpenter had given him broad shoulders and strong forearms. My sisters sighed for him, but Jesus only had eyes for his mission and for Mary Magdalene. Sometimes we prayed together. I was older than him, yet he was always a teacher in everything. He was simply fascinating, and Jesus, unlike the rest, always did what he said and treated others with kindness and compassion. I had no doubt at all that he was the Messiah. Just by watching him drink water, he made you know how you should live, enjoying every drop, God's gift, every moment. When I got sick, my sisters called him, but he didn't make it in time. As you know, the Bible says he stayed away preaching a few more days. As I closed my eyes and took my last breath, 3 angels appeared and said I had to go with them. They were actually demons after my soul to anger Jesus. Then Archangel Michael arrived, quickly took us, and told me to stay by his side as the Messiah had ordered. I felt peace, love, and joy as I was taken to the heavens. And those 4 days passed in seconds until I heard the voice. And those words, the ones that still make me jump, no matter where I am. Those beautiful words, Lazarus, get up and come out. It was truly impossible not to obey. And I was resurrected. They took off my burial shrouds, and I met again with those who loved me. It will be like that for everyone who believes in him, except for me, since I have been immortal ever since. And the most important thing about Jesus, what you will never find in books, is, wait, we're here, let's get out here. The 3 of them went up some narrow stairs, and after opening a hatch, they all came out to the shore of the lake. Right away, the short sword that León was carrying started to heat up until it burst into a bright flame. But the handle didn't burn Papa. In fact, it reminded him of his tennis racket's handle. Rukaku pointed to the side and saw that among the abandoned boats there was an old black altar, covered by an improvised roof made of broken boats. Lazarus checked it and said, look, the witches wrote a prayer to the devil. They carved it in wood. These symbols mean I am the last of the Lare. When it eats me, there will be no more. Until another person reads this. Then the Leviathan will awaken to feed again. Okay, we're in trouble, and hitting his head, he lamented, saying, I apologize. Since the Gayatul Hakimi incident, it seems I haven't learned anything. Never read all the symbols at once. Buddha's told me 10 times, but I don't learn. Rukaku pointed to a wooden base with a Wiccan star and said the coven was made so witches would serve as food for the monster. That way, that thing could grow faster. It must be sleeping at the bottom, waiting for some fool to read the symbols so it can eat again. Lazarus, he shouted, don't look at me like that. I'm not the Vatican's official monster hunter, just his assistant. Get ready, I think it's coming. The waters of the lake began to stir, and León, pointing to the center, said in amazement, And is that supposed to be just a little puppy? Rukaku hid behind a boat and said, I'll be around here keeping watch while you guys take care of it. That thing seemed like it would never finish coming out of the water. Just its head and neck were over 30 meters long, and its scales were as thick as Roman shields. The beast fixed its eyes on the Pope, and from a distance its nose emitted a thick white smoke, and boiling lava dripped from its mouth. Slowly it submerged again, swimming directly toward them. Lazarus said, Don't be afraid. Jesus is our ally, God is with us, and these arrows can pierce anything. Stay behind me, only I am immortal. But the Leviathan came out of the lake so fast that he didn't have time to finish the sentence and swallowed Lazarus, bow and all. The Pope ran alongside Rukaku and threw himself to the ground with the short sword in his hand. The priest reproached him. I told you the ship's cannon was better and under David's wave. But you still picked Peter's little sword. Leviathan's enormous head loomed over them, searching without seeing them. And León, with enviable courage, grabbed the sword as if it were a tennis racket and jumped as if to smash a ball. He gave the beast a deep cut, and with a terrifying scream it retreated and sank back into the lake, overflowing. Overjoyed, the Pope said, "I did it, Rukaku. I'm a real monster hunter. I defeated it. I knew that all those hours of tennis would be useful for something." But the priest, pointing over León's shoulder, stammered, "His Holiness, I think the Leviathan is angry." And when he turned around, he saw a huge ball of fire coming out of the monster's mouth. And they both had to roll to the side to avoid being roasted. León started praying, asking God to help him, and when he opened his eyes, he saw the medal that Rukaku was wearing. One of the Sacred Heart, where Jesus shows his chest with one hand and has the other raised. Then he knew. The footsteps of that enormous Leviathan could be felt. It has left the water and is coming toward them. The Pope stands in front of it, calm and serene. That thing looks at him, puzzled. It has crocodile legs, a snake body, and the claws and head of an infernal dragon. Rukaku yells at him, "What are you doing? Hide, or in a few days we'll have another conclave. Come on!" But León raised a hand and shouted, "By the power of God, I tell you, Lazarus, rise and come out." The Leviathan blew smoke from its nose and opened its mouth like a volcano about to erupt. But just before burning León, the monster's eyes closed and it began to convulse. As its belly split wide open, its burning guts spilled out, and from inside, with an arrow in each hand, Lazarus emerged, shouting, "I told you, Your Holiness, I always answer that call." These arrows pierced through everything. The body of the huge slain monster quickly turned to ashes, which the wind swept back into the lake. The three of them hugged, and Lazarus said, "That's how we did it. Her holy cousin Cachia is finished. Now we must return." The Pope was so happy that he himself operated the mining cart's crank all the way back. They sang praises to God and laughed as if they were drunken sailors who had defeated a whale, a Leviathan. León and Rukaku said goodbye to Lazarus, who, after giving them a warm hug, quickly settled back into his armchair and fell asleep immediately. But first he told them to stay quiet in the orc's hallway. The dwarves cast a spell on them because they wanted time to escape peacefully without being attacked at the slightest noise, like pumas from hell. But Rukaku interrupted, saying they already knew, closed the door, and they went into the dark hallway. The priest held the lantern as the Pope followed. And when they were halfway through, only then did they hear a voice behind them, a sinister one that said,
"Cheers. Which one of you sneezed first? Who woke us from death?" And
when they turned around, they saw the orcs leaving the walls to chase them with their claws outstretched. The beasts were fast, but they ran like terrified hares to reach the exit elevator. They pulled the lever without looking back and breathed a sigh of relief when they realized those things couldn't leave the huge corridor to chase them. In the Pope's room, León recovered and looked at Rukaku. He wasn't happy at all because he almost had a heart attack from the fright. So with piercing eyes, he said to him, "I'm warning you, Rukaku. I don't want to see you for a long time. If there's another one of these secrets, just leave it written somewhere, and I'll read it when I have time." But Rukaku made the sign of the cross and replied, "I'm afraid that's not possible, Your Holiness, because you see, every new pope, whether he wants to or not, has to know the secrets. And well, in a few days I'll come to get you to take you to the Vatican's damn vault, Your Holiness, without exception. There you must meet the one who walks behind the walls, see the Ancient One who dwells beneath the 3 crosses, because there we have why. Upon hearing his name, the Pope grabbed his head with both hands and replied, I don't think you, me, Lazarus, or even Judas would be a worthy rival against someone like that, even with that cannon. How did we manage to lock him up? Rukaku's answer was even more devastating. But that's another story. And I'm the documentarian. And that was it. The Pope. León visits Lazarus.